Hello everybody and welcome to the CLG Speedrunning YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be sitting down with ZFG and kind of just asking some questions about both Ocarina of Time and his speedrunning career. But I think it's better if you introduce yourself. So who is CFG?
Hey, so I'm ZFG. I'm an Ocarina of Time speedrunner. I've been speedrunning this game for like 16 years now, far too long.
Damn, that's a long time. So like how did you get into speedrunning then? Because like 16 years ago like was not mainstream at all.
Yeah, so Ocarina of Time was always my favorite game. And one thing I like to do with a lot of my favorite games back in the day was I'd look up glitches and cheats on the internet. And so there's one site I went to, Cheat Planet. A lot of people might remember that site from back in the day. It had like cheats for games, but also like little glitches and stuff you could do in games. And I loved looking at all the glitches in all my favorite games, including Ocarina of Time. And it just had like small ones at the time, like you could get a heart piece early here or there, and it didn't even have stuff like infinite sword glitch. This was like super old, but it had little things here and there. And but then later on, I also went to this Zelda fan site called the Hylia, and this was like late 2006, early 2007, and I saw an article posted about an Ocarina of Time speedrun, and in the speedrun they use glitches to go fast, and I'm like, oh, I like glitches, I like those things, and apparently you can use them to go fast in the game. That sounds kind of cool. So then I started learning about speedrunning and learning about how they, use glitches to go faster in games. And I thought, this is a really cool concept. I want to try it out. I want to get into it. And then I never stopped.
So those forums, so those kind of like post a cheat code if the game has it, but since OT doesn't have that, it was more focused on skips and glitches then?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's really interesting. So once you get introduced to speedrunning then from like that video you said in 2006, I think, was that...
Yeah, 2006 or 2007, somewhere around there.
Was that also what led you into like streaming, or is that separate from like when you started speedrunning and like looking into the glitches?
So streaming was a bit later. So streaming wasn't really a thing that early. I want to say like streaming sort of started in 2009-ish, 2010. I remember back in the day we had like this little IRC channel with like 20 people, which was the whole Zelda speedrunning community. And sometime in, I don't know, 2009 or something, a few of them started streaming on, I think, Ustream. And they were like, dude, streaming is like perfect for speedruns, because normally when you speedrun, you just sit in your room alone and press the reset button for hours on end. But if you are streaming, then you can like talk to people while you're doing it, and they can watch, and it's like so cool. And so it just seemed like this supernatural fit for speedrunning. And then a few years went by and Ustream went, I don't know, no one cares about Ustream. No one cared about Ustream for a while. And then Justin turned to Twitch, and Twitch got big. People started to notice speedrunning on Twitch. And then things started to get much bigger from there.
So were you streaming the whole time from Ustream onto Justin TV and Twitch TV, or did you just kind of jump straight to Twitch TV?
So I actually only streamed like once or twice on Ustream. I just didn't have the equipment for it. I think I got streaming equipment very shortly after Twitch started. So I probably started streaming, I don't know, I want to say 3-ish months after Twitch began.
So if you started that long ago, because if I'm not mistaken with my time period, Twitch should be like 2012, 2013, around there?
I want to say it was 2011.
2011, okay. How long was it from like you starting doing that until you started like taking it seriously enough to where you could think this could be like either like a part-time job or like a job?
I want to say I started streaming about 2011. I want to say like by 2013 I was getting pretty good viewership, but the monetization part wasn't quite there with Twitch yet. I want to say like maybe 2016, 2017, around the Twitch Prime era, when Twitch Prime took off. Then it was like, okay, yeah, maybe I can actually take this more seriously.
Would you say that like for you there's like has like speedrunning changed in like how you look at video games and OT specifically? Like, do you have like this sort of speedrunning lens now where you struggle with casual games? Because I know you don't usually stream a lot of casual games on your channel. Is there a reason for that? Like, do you play a lot offline, or is it kind of all speedrunning now?
Yeah, so I do play casual games sometimes, but yeah, when I do play casual games, I definitely sort of look at it from a speedrun lens. Like, I don't exclusively try to look at it as speedrun lens, but even when I'm playing casually, I will notice like, oh, this movement thing, this could be like a good and useful movement tech, or oh, you might be able to like, climb this ledge early. Like, even I was playing Pokemon recently, the terrible Pokemon game that has very exploitable movement glitches that I noticed like day one. Yeah, I like more than just speedrun quirks in general. I like looking at like general game mechanic quirks. Even if they're not useful for speedruns, I always kind of like understanding how like little weird mechanics work and how to exploit them, I think. I always
Hmm.
just found that really interesting. And so I will usually like kind of try to pay attention to that whenever I play a game. Even if I'm just playing casually, I just kind of like those things.
So, would you say that you have more of an interest in video games that can be exploited through glitches, or do you also find intended mechanics like movement to be as equally interesting?
Yeah, intended mechanics can definitely be pretty interesting, but I feel like most of the games I play, I'm more interested in the glitches aspect because I'm more interested in like, Zelda and Metroid type games rather than like platformers. And in those games, movement is, I mean, Metroid games have pretty amazing movement sometimes, but Zelda games are not exactly known for their movement. They usually have, more interesting glitches compared to movement, while as platformers have usually more interesting movement compared to glitches. I definitely like the good movement stuff, but I guess I do like a little bit more on the glitches side for things.
No, that definitely makes sense. Obviously, as many viewers of this probably are aware, you obviously do play OT, and just like you mentioned, that's how you kind of got into streaming in this whole world. So, since you mentioned that you picked up Ocarina of Time since like 2005, what's kept you motivated to play the game for so long? Because even competitive games, like Counter Strike and stuff, there's very few people that will play the same game, for like 15 plus years.
Yeah, so Ocarina of Time is really interesting because of all the glitches, things get found so frequently that the game evolves and changes so often. Like we have had many points in history where the game has literally changed overnight. Like not even a figurative thing. Like I remember there was this one time when a glitch called wrong warp is found, which we might get into a bit later, where one day the any percent speed run is an hour, and the next day it's half an hour, and 2 days after that it's 20 minutes. And there have been multiple points in Ocarina of Time history like that, and the game just keeps evolving. And because there are so many different ways to play the game with glitches, we also have lots of different categories that have vastly different speedruns. And I just think all the different ways you can play the game through the different categories, the different glitches you can exploit, there's just so many different ways you can enjoy the game, and I just like a lot of them.
So you mentioned there that, like, for example, wrong warping was found, and I can assume back in 2005, 2006 there, it was mostly play the game somewhat kind of casually glitchless with the occasional skip here and there. Well, like, what's the first moment you can think about where, like, a glitch was found that was so major that it almost sort of caused, like, a controversy because it changed the game so fundamentally in how it was, like, kind of approached?
Well, actually, before wrong warping, there was actually still some pretty big glitches that skipped maybe a third to a half of the game before that, but there weren't really controversial. Well, I guess there's like two sort of controversial glitches. One of them is known as reverse bottle adventure. So this is a glitch where if you get a bottle on your B button through a different glitch, you can modify your inventory based on catching something in that bottle on your B button, based on what item you have on a C right button. And so by having different kinds of items on one button, you can just start changing your inventory, and you can give yourself like really important story items, really important items that you should not have early on. And so some people don't like this as much because it's kind of like you're just kind of rewriting memory. Now it is like a super limited form of rewriting memory, but it does have some very powerful applications that some people weren't a huge fan of.
And what year was this found around?
So reverse bottle adventure was actually found in like 2006, 2007, around when I started, but it was a very complicated glitch that wasn't very well understood for another 2 or so years, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like 2008, 2009 is when we kind of started to understand the power of it and how much we could actually do with it. And then wrong warping, which was found in, I believe, 2012. This is a glitch where when ending a dungeon, if you somehow load a different area at the same time as you're finishing a dungeon, this can teleport you to some seemingly completely unrelated area, which can include stuff like going directly to the credits or directly to Ganon's castle at the end of the game. And this is a glitch that sped up the speedrun by so much. It went down to 20 minutes. And some people thought it was a bit excessive, especially a variant that warped directly to the credits, which ended up being slower long term, which is interesting. And then faster again longer term because the game evolves a lot. And yeah, so some people didn't like that you were going directly to the end, that you were or going directly to the credits. I personally liked it a lot. I thought it was really interesting. Plus, wrong warping has a lot of different applications than just going to the end. There are some speedruns that use it just for fast travel or getting some items early. It's a glitch that has a lot of different applications, so it was controversial for some people, but I personally thought it was a really neat thing.
So you mentioned that some people found it controversial by credits warping, I should say, because it's not really beating the game. Would you say that you didn't have a problem with it because the speedrun as a whole, like the category was really interesting, or just specifically that part? Like, do you think it's still considered beating the game?
Yeah, I just think the concept is interesting. I think at this point, credits warping was not a super common glitch in speedruns yet. It's become more common in recent years as people get better at like learning the glitches of these old games. But it wasn't as common back in the day, and I thought it was just a really cool concept. You had to exploit some really interesting mechanics in order to get it to work, which I'm just a fan of having to do some like very unique and interesting gameplay mechanics and make them cause the game to do stuff that it's not supposed to do. So yeah, it's more of like a conceptual point that I think is very interesting. Now, it does... I do understand where people are coming from. If they don't like credits warping, I can kind of get it. In fact, the newest version of the 90% speedrun with the most up-to-date glitches does a credits warp like 3 minutes after gaining control of your character. So it's like you're literally running around for 3 minutes spinning in a circle, and then you fall in the credits, and then it's just like it does seem silly, but at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, Ocarina of Time has a lot of different categories, and the way I see it, these categories are meant so that like if you don't like one category, you can do the others. I understand if you don't like credits warping, and part of that I like it from a conceptual standpoint, but at the same time, if you don't like it, there's also multiple different categories of different things you can do to beat the game.
Yeah, you mentioned multiple different categories there, and I think people that's found you, at least in recent years, they think of you as either like, mostly in terms of speedrunning, probably like a 100% speedrunner, like the so-called dubbed king of 100%, if you may. I'm sure you didn't give yourself that title, but you're talking about these old speedruns and these rung warps, and obviously that's mostly for the 90% category in terms of credits warping. Was there a sort of period of time where you just felt that 90% was becoming too boring due to the amount of skips, and that's why you switched to 100%, or were you always interested in it?
So at that time, I was not super interested in 90% when it became very short, but that's not necessarily due to what happened in 90%. I just generally like longer categories. I like categories where you have to do a lot of things, and when 90% became do only a few things to beat the game, I'm not really concerned about how the game got beaten. It's just that it didn't do a whole lot to achieve it. And so in general, I like when you have to do a lot of things. And then naturally that led me to 100% because that is the most things. And because in 100%, you just have so many specific small objectives. And I just find it super interesting on figuring out how are you going to most optimally string together all of these like hundreds of objectives into one run and find the most optimal way to do them all in a row. That was just super interesting to me, especially because you had so much to work with in terms of glitches in order to how you want to route things. And so 100% just always appealed most to me because it had the most potential.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And when you're talking about these like 90% categories becoming shorter, obviously that's like with new glitches. And you kind of briefly mentioned earlier how with the introduction of like Bottle Adventure back in, the early 2000s, how you were kind of partially writing to memory or almost like coding the game of sorts, and then, you're exploiting values with the rung warping and stuff. Nowadays, I'm sure many people are aware of Ocarina of Time's SRM or ACE, which is like arbitrary code execution and stale reference manipulation. So how do you feel that like those glitches has changed the outlook? And maybe also perhaps like a simple explanation of like what those are in terms of Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, so for a brief overview of stale reference manipulation and arbitrary code execution, it's this glitch where, in a very short way to put it, you can modify memory that's supposed to no longer be being modified, and then have that actually end up modifying certain game data. And then you can use this to modify things like what equipment Link is wearing, what items has equipped, where he's going to go to next in the next entrance, which you can make it just go to the credits. It's a very powerful thing, and then it can lead to arbitrary code execution, which, as the name implies, just lets you flat out rewrite memory however you want. And so this was actually a fairly controversial glitch for a while, because so in Ocarina of Time speedruns, we generally don't like to ban glitches. We will sometimes separate a category with and without a certain glitch if it becomes super powerful, but we generally try to avoid that. So with stale reference manipulation, when it got found, it basically changed every single category overnight. And for a while, we just wanted to allow it, see how it went down. After a while, pretty much everyone realized, okay, this is really powerful, but we don't want to ban it. We just want to separate it into separate categories. And so nowadays, SRM, most categories have an SRM and no SRM category. And personally, I think the glitch is really fascinating. As I mentioned earlier, just because I like, abusing cool game mechanics and cool stuff like that. SRM has a lot of very interesting applications. It does make the short categories even shorter and even less content dense. Like I mentioned earlier, the any percent speedrun is like 3 minutes now. It's kind of... I kind of see it as a joke, but in some things like 100% with SRM is, in my opinion, possibly the coolest speedrun that I've ever done or seen. I think it is just an incredible speedrun. It does so many things that it makes it look like it's not the same game. You look like you're watching a completely different game. But yeah, I think it's super fascinating.
Yeah, I know back when SRM was implemented in 100%, a lot of runners chose to speedrun no SRM, and you were only one of the few people that stuck with the SRM run. If it was down to you, if you are the kind of deciding factor of the community, would you still have chosen for SRM to be the quote-unquote default 100% category?
I understand it not being the default category because it is extremely complicated. It is actually such an incredibly high barrier of entry speedrun. I think I had to practice for a month just so I could actually do a run, and that's with having years of OOT experience. So I completely understand it not being the default, but I do think the option we went with of just separating categories. So nowadays we have a 100% with SRM and without SRM category separate. I think that really is the best solution, because as much as I love 100% with SRM, it is such a ridiculously complicated run that I can't blame anyone for not wanting to do it. But I think we had a good solution to it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And yeah, it definitely pleases most people. Since you do find the glitch part so fascinating, would you say that we are currently in the golden age of Ocarina of Time speedrunning from your perspective? Or is there another time period where you think you had the most fun with Ocarina of Time?
Yeah, pretty much. I think a little bit pre-SRM there was also a lot of stuff going on in the 2018, 2019 era, where we started to see a lot more glitches that were not really these memory, manipulation glitches. And so in that era, we kind of found a lot of small medium stuff that just kind of kept adding up in that 1 to 2 year period that I thought was really good. But then SRM kind of dominated all OOT glitch hunting for about a year and a half maybe. But then since then, other non-SRM stuff is starting to get found a lot. But also about the golden age thing, one thing that's really helped a lot recently is that Ocarina of Time has what's known as the Decompilation project, where people are working on reverse engineering the entire source code for Ocarina of Time. And it's sort of done asterisk. They have completed one version of Ocarina of Time, and there are multiple different versions, and they're still working on a lot of documentation and stuff for it. But at the very least, there is one version of Ocarina of Time that has a completely reverse engineered source code, and that has helped a lot with finding glitches, figuring out why glitches work. There are so many glitches that we didn't understand how they worked for a long time, and then because of the Decompilation project, we can look at the code and be like, oh, that's why it worked. Hey, wait, we can probably abuse this in this other way. And then we find this other glitch that seems like it would be unrelated, but actually it's the same thing.
I didn't even know that. Do you have any examples of that being put into use?
Actually, stale reference manipulation is pretty much one of them. So a really interesting story about stale reference manipulation is it was officially discovered in late 2019, but the first video documentation of it was 2007. We just didn't know what was happening. It was this video of Link carrying an enemy, and we just thought, haha, funny glitch, Link carrying an enemy, that's funny. And then it turns out he's manipulating memory because something unloaded and then a different thing loaded into his hand. And then suddenly Link is manipulating memory he shouldn't be manipulating. And then that led to the realization of, oh wait, we can do this to do stuff like modify chest contents. And then you can open a chest and get a different item inside. And it's like, oh wait, we can modify this to like change functions in actors, and then we can get actors to do crazy stuff like give you items or warp you somewhere. And that all came from like being able to look at the source code and look at how certain things were behaving.
That's so cool. I had no idea that any of that was like at all thanks to the source code. Is there anything you would say though, like that you miss? You know, like back in the day, obviously there's less knowledge of the game, but like, do you ever like, kind of miss a time period where you felt like, you know, maybe everything wasn't found, so the run was different, or like there was just some like mysterious kind of factors in relation to everything because like we didn't know of everything and how it worked?
I in general, I do like that we know more about the game. There are some glitches that have become obsolete. There are some variations of tricks that I thought were so cool, and now we have newer, much more optimized versions of them that are like, it's so simple. Like we used to have this trick in Fire Temple where we would do this really cool hover down a long shaft, and then you could barely just hover over the boss door and do a boss key skip. And then the newer version is like you just clip through this wall and then you're just in the boss room real easily, and there's like no work into it, and it's like, it's really cool. And I like that we're more optimized, but some of the old tricks, we had to come up with some really unique ways to do some of the old tricks. But yeah, it's all for the sake of going faster.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the point of speedrunning after all. Would you say that there's anything about like the streaming world you really miss? Like, is there a favorite time period, either in terms of your community or just in terms of like Twitch culture as a whole, that you prefer, or are you like really happy with how things are right now?
Generally, I think things are pretty good now, but I kind of miss the like 2014-ish era of Twitch where just like it was so wild and like, how do I put this? Were you there in the like 2014 era?
Yeah, I joined 2013.
Yeah. Do you remember when it was like all chats were just chaos?
Yeah.
And all streams were like so low quality.
Yeah.
And it was just so what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. It has its charm, I guess.
Yeah, it just had like this low quality wild charm to it.
Definitely. I've said to my Twitch chat a few times that I missed the really old 2013, 2014 GDQ chat when everyone was just spamming these copy pastas and like anything happened and everyone spammed Kappa and Pog. Jam.
I love the old copy pasta spam in GDQ chat.
Yeah, that was a really good time for sure. But as someone who's been streaming them for that long, and I know you said you played a few games casually, and obviously OT, it's kept you motivated due to all of these glitches, but like, is there any other game in terms of like speedrunning that you've like ever tried to like pick up seriously somewhat, or like that's really piqued your interest?
Yeah, so I guess the one game that I've speedran fairly seriously for a decently long period of time was Majora's Mask, which, you know, huge shocker. Ocarina of Time speedrunner plays Majora's Mask. I did run Majora's Mask from like 2012 to 2013. I was pretty good at it. I had multiple records at the time. I was good at one point. I am now extremely washed up. But yeah, I liked running Majora's Mask a lot. The one downside about running that game is that the intro of the game is very long and tedious, and it made it kind of hard to stick around for a while. And it does have a lot of unique glitches like OOT, but doesn't quite have the category variety of OOT. I still love the game. I still love watching speedruns of it. I still think it's a great speedrun. I couldn't really keep doing it myself, and I just kind of eventually realized I just like OOT more. Still love MM though.
So do you think at some point you would ever consider picking it back up, or is it completely off the table due to the intro and the kind of...
If there's some like intro skip kind of thing, maybe, but I don't know if I could sit through a 20-minute intro again.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very fair. Is there any games outside of like the 3D Zelda games you've ever tried for speedrunning?
Yeah, so one of my other favorite games is Metroid Prime, and I did actually speedrun that for a while, and not for a super long time, and I think it was either before I started streaming, or I don't know if I ever streamed it, but yeah, I ran Metroid Prime for a while. I think Metroid Prime is a super cool speedrun, has like some really, really great movement and some really cool glitches. I got okay at it, but I was never like super good. I've been saying for years that there's this meme in my chat like someday I'll go back to Metroid Prime speedruns, which I've been saying for probably over a decade at this point.
Maybe with the Switch trilogy coming out, it'd be a good time.
Oh yes. The thing that will totally come out soon. But yeah, Metroid Prime. I love Metroid Prime.
That's fair. Do you like feel like you don't keep up with the speedrunner community? Like, do you like to keep up with, like, for example, the other Zelda games and see what kind of glitches are discovered even if you're not running them?
Yeah, I definitely try to keep up with a lot of the Zelda and Metroid speedruns. Not always. There are some times where I kind of dip out for a while and then I come back and realize that new things have been found. But yeah, I do like keeping up with them. I like Zelda speedruns in general, especially because, you know, they are known for being pretty glitchy and having lots of unique tricks in them. So yeah, I like to keep up with a lot of them, even if I don't speedrun them.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I know for like myself, obviously I speedrun Wind Waker, but if anyone asked me like what my favorite casual Zelda game is, I probably would say personally myself, like Breath of the Wild. Do you have like a game other than OT or OT that like you have as your favorite like casual Zelda game?
Yeah, it actually would be Breath of the Wild also.
It would. Gotcha. Yeah. And what terms of like games, like overall, like not OT, like any game, not just Zelda, would it still be Breath of the Wild, or do you have like another favorite of yours?
I guess going back to Metroid Prime, I'd probably say I like Metroid Prime casually a little bit more than Breath of the Wild, but they're like right around the same. Yeah, those two games are basically my favorite casual games.
I know, like, in terms of, like, speedrunning, that it has shifted a bit over the years, where, like, instead of, you know, speedrunning being one of the biggest parts of Twitch, it's now very much, like, a side thing on Twitch. But a lot of people have obviously probably even found you on YouTube, and you're listening to this on YouTube right now. Have you ever, like, felt more motivated to make more videos on YouTube, or do you not find the kind of production of creating a video to be interesting?
Yeah, I actually have been really interested in that, and I've just been really lazy about doing it. I actually have always wanted to start making more like glitch explanation videos and stuff like that, and I keep being lazy about it. I kind of recently started with doing some YouTube short stuff that do like glitch explanations, but I need to stop being lazy about it and do more. It's like I'm motivated in my head, but it's hard to actually do it. But yeah, I do definitely want to make more like content like that.
Is that partially why you've been motivated to do randomizers? Do you find that trend of randomizer in the speedrun community to be part of YouTube, or just something that's kind of fun to change things up from speedrunning?
Actually, it doesn't really have anything to do with like Twitch or YouTube or anything. The actual reason I started doing it is going back to what I said about how Ocarina of Time has a lot of different ways to play it. There are actually a lot of times in Ocarina of Time you can't make use of there's a lot of certain situations that can happen in randomizer that cannot happen in regular Ocarina of Time, and you can use certain glitches to do really interesting things in randomizer that you can't in Ocarina of Time. And so what I've been doing no logic randomizers, which what this means is normal randomizers have logic that makes it so that all the items are always placed in a place where they can actually be gotten no matter what. They're always beatable. But I do no logic, which means that sometimes they can be beatable. Items can be literally anywhere, even if they are impossible or you have to do some kind of ridiculous trick to do them. And that's the actual reason I've been doing randomizers. Is it's another way for me to get into weird situations in Ocarina of Time that I couldn't really get into in speedruns, and a different way to be able to mess around with all the cool things I can do in Ocarina of Time that just sometimes there just isn't a place for in speedruns.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Do you ever sometimes feel like nostalgic because you can kind of just pull out a glitch that you know from like 2007 that hasn't been used in a run in years but can be helpful in like a randomizer?
Yeah, that actually happened a lot early on when I first started doing randomizers. I would get into situations where like, oh my god, I haven't used this trick in like 10 years. Do I still remember the setup for it? Oh my god, I do. And then I get to show chat this cool glitch they've probably never seen before that's super old, and then they're like, oh my god, that's so cool. And yeah, that's part of it. Is just there's finally a place for some of these really cool glitches that just don't have a place in regular speedrunning, but now they can in these very situational situations in randomizer.
That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. I really do appreciate it. Do you have any last words, any socials that people should check you out on?
Yeah, so my Twitter is ZFG111, Twitch ZFG1. That's pretty much the only ones that matter.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this little mini podcast of sorts on the CLG Speedrun YouTube channel. This is Linkus7 and CFG signing out. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the little commentary. Let us know if you want more. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
See ya.